The topic for this week is XR and art. XR, as you know, stands for augmented reality, virtual reality, and mixed reality more or less together. So this X is sometimes taken to stand for extended. So extended reality, you really extend reality as you know it by adding virtual digital elements to it. I think it's a very nice term because also as a mathematical symbol, X is typically a variable that can be replaced by something else, like a V for VR or an A for AR or an M for MR. So therefore, I think it's a very nice term. And in this series of clips, we're going to look at how XR has been used for creating works of art. And then we specifically look at language. So if you combine XR and art and language, what you then get is digital literature. What I don't mean with digital literature are things like traditional books, also not ebooks. About virtual reality, for instance, there are those very nice books about VR, more or less popular scientific books. If you want to know more about VR, you can read those. Those are really nice books. But this is not what's meant with digital literature, of course. What I also don't mean with digital literature is things like traditional novels, even if they are about things like virtual reality, even if they're speculating about the future in which virtual reality or augmented reality might play a certain role. These are also very nice, more or less science fiction like novels. But that's also not what's meant with digital literature. What actually is meant with digital literature is in the definition by the Electronic Literature Organization, works with important literary aspects that take advantage of the capabilities and context provided by the standalone or networked computer. So here the term digital literature is often replaced by electronic literature, but it's more or less exactly the same. And what's important here is that artists, literary artists, have started creating new literary works that have a certain literary component. So they are of a certain literary quality, for instance, or they relate to existing literary traditions. But at the same time, they also have a very important digital component. And this digital component really adds something to the work itself. So it's different from ebooks in that sense, because ebooks you could print and then you simply get a novel or so printed. And the work itself doesn't really change whether you read it in a traditional book or in an electronic version. In the case of digital literature, the digital component really adds something. So you can, for instance, think of algorithms that are created to automatically create works of poetry. So there, the digital component, the algorithm really adds something to the literary work. Or you can think of, for instance, interactive literary stories. So you can think of reading a certain story on your smartphone, and at some point as a reader, you need to take a decision yourself, press this button or press that button. And as a function of your response, the story will develop in one way or another. So here again, the digital component really adds something to the work. But of course, there are also instances of augmented reality, for instance, being used in combination with poetry, or virtual reality being used in combination with literary stories. And here, again, the technology really adds something. And we'll look at several examples in this series of clips today, because I think this is very exciting. There are also books about this. So those books themselves, they are not parts of examples of digital literature, but they talk about digital or electronic literature. And this is really a phenomenon that has been around already for a long time, really for decades. But with advances in technology, for instance, in terms of VR and AR, artists are constantly creating new works and really making use of the affordances of technology to create some kind of new literary experience. So here's one example by an artist called Mess Breeze. She's really talking about VR literature. So really this new type, relatively new type of literature that's different from more traditional types of literature, such as novels or poetry, poems. And in this experience, you could call it an experience, perhaps. You wear a headset or you watch this experience in an internet browser. And there is a certain amount of literary poetic text, but also there are visual images that really add something to the literary work. So really there's this interplay between different senses. It's not just text in a book, it's not just a poem in a book, but it's really text and also visual images. And one additional thing, if you're wearing this headset, is that you then no longer are just looking in front of you in the way you're doing this when you're reading a novel or a poem, for instance, traditionally, but you can really look around, and the text can be in all sorts of places, and the images can be in all sorts of places, and also perhaps the location of where the text and those images are presented might mean something, might imply something for the literary work. So this offers all sorts of new affordances, and is, I think, very exciting.